This is for Comp 1 over the issue of eminent domain abuse. Now, the issue of eminent domain abuse has attracted significant attention in the US, leading to heated discussion on the one hand about the extent of the government's authority, and on the other hand about the safeguarding of private property. The use of eminent domain is a step taken for public properties such as highways, schools, hospitals, etc. But the RAMA application creates larger problems, and domain abuse refers to the case when the government seizes private property for purposes that do not qualify as proper public use, or does not pay the proper property owner just compensation. In contrast to the standard eminent domain, which addresses the needs of the whole community in a clear manner, the abuse often helps private interests over ordinary citizens. The context of eminent domain abuse occurs when the government takes private property for a reason that is not real public use, or when it is not proper compensation to the proprietor. With In the case of eminent domain abuse, one of the more popular cases, Kelo versus the City of New London, the case stands out as one of the more notorious examples of eminent domain abuse because of, in this instance, the Supreme Court decided that the city had the right to buy the private residence and give the property to a private builder, provided that the undertaking was anticipated to produce economic benefits such as new job opportunities or more tax income. Although technically labeled as public use, the discussion shocks Americans and critics to how easy economic promises can be used to justify taking property from ordinary citizens. And Kelo case becomes more of a symbol of how eminent domain abuse can shift from a tool of building highways and hospitals and schools, which are useful, but not when you are taking a private proprietor's property to and not giving just compensation, but rather, uh, in most cases, the just compensation is how much money the property was originally paid for. And since the housing market goes up, that just compensation feels more like $2 on a coupon rather than compensation of the removal of their house, farm, business, or a historical site. And the eminent domain abuse isn't just selectively in America, although I do have two cases right here, which is both Kelo versus the City of New London, where the proprietor had lived in there since 1997. She's been there for over 60 years. And she had 15 properties, uh, and she's given to some of her family members, but they claimed that this was of public use. And back to the compensation, as we can see from Texas, the University of Texas, oftentimes the just compensation is not really completely compensated, as he says here, and it doesn't respect the proprietor's emotional distress per se, since you are taking their livelihood. However, this issue isn't just American, as we have seen cases in China of forced land seizures that have become increasingly more common in cities due to the city's rapid expansion. Now, entire communities have been uprooted due to this. They have been uprooted with very little compensation, and resistance often met with police force. These cases highlight what happens when eminent domain exists without strong legal safeguards or judicial oversight. Now, research by Canusa and Adams documented how land traditionally held by families or local chiefs, and this is a Native American example, are seized by the government for public interest. Yet the compensation process is not only slow, inconsistent, and sometimes never completed. So sometimes they don't even get the compensation that they are required by the government. And the work on these projects is often slow, and their work shows even in democratic states, and domain abuse can create long-term conflict with the definition of public benefit remaining very vague. Another angle comes from the US, which we are reviewing, where the just compensation, which I've discussed, is often not very high. It's very low and rather inconsistent and vague on what the compensation can be. Taken together, these cases show how that eminent domain abuse is not a simple legal tool, it's a global moral question about fairness and power, and the means of public good. Whether in New London, rural China, or communities in New Guinea, the pattern remains the same. When a government and private interests merge, ordinary people become vulnerable. My goal is to offer a possible solution. My possible solution, and I believe this will not work 100%, it's not foolproof, but I believe this could work better. I think this could work if there was stricter judicial guidelines or safeguards to protect private properties. And I think that there should be stricter safeguards or judicial process in what defines public use. And it ensures that private owners receive truly fair compensation. So not just what they paid for when they originally bought the property, but also when, like, a government housing per se, since they are losing their house, their business, essentially their way of life. I think that it would be more beneficial if they were given some sort of housing or more money. Now, in an ideal world, possibly the government could issue government farms where they are essentially relocated from the farm that they own to another farm that they could work at and have essentially fair compensation where they are doing the same job and earning essentially the same money. Additionally, though, I think that all cases of eminent domain abuse should be looked at more carefully to see if that the removal of said property is needed. Now, I'm not denying that hospitals, schools, highways are needed, but I think that ordinary people, should not lose their housing or their farms just due to the government needing to put up a new business, school, highway, or hospital. And if there is a reason that they need to do this, the compensation needs to be fair. I think that since the generational legacy isn't preserved of like historical buildings, there needs to be at least some recognition when they are teared down or more fair compensation. But that's about it, and I'll see you later.